So this is the everything panel. We're going to talk about everything. So we have like 15 mini panels within the panel with different topics. And we have a very diverse group of thought leaders in this space that are working in very successful companies. So I'm looking forward to get their perspective. So let's start with intros. And Ryan, we have to start with you because you were cool until last night. Now you have a new job.
So I'm Ryan Feit. I'm the CEO and co-founder of SeedInvest. We're a leading equity crowdfunding platform based here in New York City. We were very involved in the formation of the Jobs Act back in late 2011 and early 2012. I've worked pretty closely with the SEC and FINRA over the years on turning that into actual regulation that a lot of us here take advantage of now. We have a couple 100,000 investors on our platform, including 40,000 accredited investors. And we today fund early stage startups, and very excited to be joining the Circle family and be launching security tokens hopefully in the near future.
Awesome. So this is Ralph. No, I'm kidding. Ralph couldn't make it, so Max is here from tZERO. So
Max Melmed, Chief Strategy Officer at tZERO. Was lucky enough to meet our former CEO a couple weeks out of college. As he was starting a company called Speedroute. Not a very sexy business, basically smart routing broker-dealer connected to all U.S. equity markets, inbound connections from all the different trading systems, as well as an alternative trading system, which Patrick Byrne, CEO of Oved, took particular interest in when he wanted to build a new market for kind of leveraging blockchain technology, meeting capital markets. So wanted to utilize our ATS. This all started back in 2014. And then we were fully acquired in August of 2015, where he wanted to take our ATS as well as Speedroute, which had all the inbound connectivity from kind of traditional Wall Street. So we're building out a home for future security tokens and kind of blockchain leads capital markets where it makes sense.
Cool. Howard Marks is a very successful entrepreneur who is now venturing into security tokens and crypto. So why don't you tell us about yourself?
Yeah, I'm making my journey from the game world into finance, and it looks pretty much the same. Yeah. Maybe just
is that the intro?
Yeah, that's my intro. Okay, so I'm Howard Marks. I'm the co-founder of StartEngine, and my mission is to help entrepreneurs achieve their dreams. And I basically got started with StartEngine as an accelerator to help entrepreneurs. I made a lot of investments. Most of them went out of business. Couldn't raise any capital, and I felt very frustrated. So I decided to see if there was a way to change it. And just then the Jobs Act came out, and I read it, and I decided, okay, we can make a platform around this. And so that's how StartEngine was born, as a platform. And so we've raised capital for over 150 businesses so far. We're launching about 30 companies a month. And it's going great. We're going to build, we're going to be announcing soon our ERC 1450 smart contract to help tokenize securities. We have a registered transfer agent with the SEC, so we can hold all the shares and basically in book entry. We also are building an alternative trading system, although we're not yet registered as a broker-dealer, but that could be hopefully very soon. I think we're in the same list as a lot of people who are trying to put these trading places in place. And so we're pretty excited about this marketplace, and it's growing fast, and we see thousands of investors coming in all the time, purchasing shares, and we're very excited about it.
Oh. Vincent, you're CEO of one of the most important marketplaces in the space, so why don't you tell us about Templum?
Thanks for the
You can pay me later for the...
I hope I don't let you down. So Vince Molinari, I'm co-founder along with Chris Pilata of Templum Markets. We are a blockchain fintech holding company that is striving to create new market infrastructure for tokenized assets, digital securities. I am the CEO of Templum Markets, which is a broker-dealer fully licensed in all 50 states, a number of foreign jurisdictions. We are actually a registered ATS for the past 2 years. We also have a quotation bureau to be able to publish real-time mark-to-market quotes on these instruments, a collaboration with S&P CUSIP in order to put CUSIP identifiers on the tokens that transact on our platform. And as Howard just teed up, we've also recently been approved as a transfer agent, as a subsidiary, where we see that part of the ecosystem maybe a little bit different than a lot of other folks in the marketplace, as we look for a full end-to-end solution that is engaged around security tokens, and we don't look to compete on what may be deemed to be utility tokens or cryptocurrencies.
Cool. Michael, you're going to help me keep this panel technical? So tell us about AirSwap.
Sure, I'll get to that in a sec. Michael Oved, I'm co-founder of AirSwap. I was a mathematician from Carnegie Mellon. Went and joined Wall Street for a small company called Virtu Financial, which is now one of the biggest trading companies in the world. Left that company in 2015, just gained a really deep understanding of financial markets, trade on pretty much every exchange in the world, not only in the US. And then in early 2016, I met Joe Lubin and learned about Ethereum and just kind of realized that this was the future and this is going to automate essentially the entire back end of the financial system. And I wanted to be a part of it. And so I started to really study the space and look on the message boards and try to understand what do people want in this space. And one thing everyone talked about is a decentralized exchange. And so it's kind of a misnomer, and started to study the topic and talk to a lot of developers. And using my knowledge of markets, me and my co-founder Don, who's also a classmate of mine from Carnegie Mellon, we published the swap protocol in 2017. That formed the basis for what is now AirSwap. AirSwap is live. Earlier this week, we announced that we're doing a real estate deal with our partners at Propeller. This is our foray to try to get into the security token market. We think that this is the natural evolution of this space, obviously subject to compliance. And I'm very excited about it. AirSwap is a peer-to-peer trading platform. Our mission is to empower humans with global frictionless trade.
You just killed one of my questions, sir. Thank you very much. All right, so this is supposed to be controversial, so let's start hot. The next panel after this is about tokenization platforms. Polymath, Securities, Harbor. Are those things going to get commoditized? In your vision, Vincent?
Sure, make me start it off. Yeah, in all due respect to and we have friends at all those organizations. I think the token foundry business will be commoditized over time and probably already started to be today. I think, look, if we keep it really basic, this is a $2.4 trillion annual issuance in unregistered securities in the United States alone. That is a massive marketplace. So when people are talking about all this iteration of new things, this is a conversion of creating efficiencies to transparency, continuity of information around unregistered security instruments under Reg D, Reg S, and Reg A+, with a very clear pathway to secondary liquidity that is transparent, that doesn't have Sarbanes-Oxley, Dodd-Frank order handling rules. What was perhaps NASDAQ of 30 or 40 years ago that was doing a $5 to $50, $100 million IPO, that doesn't exist. The result of that solves the pain points of access to capital, as we all like to talk about, the democratization of capital and opening new assets in a broader way for wealth creation to investors, giving issuers better pathways to access those investors, and having a level playing field. We can put all the other sizzle around it. At the end of the day, in this marketplace, this is still a securities market practice.
Cool. And Max, you guys are on exchange, but you also all think about issuance. Do you see token issuance as a commodity 4 or 5 years from now?
Yeah, and I mean, I think Vince put it very well. At the end of the day, any type of technology that's being built out as it's new and has a tremendous amount of potential, you're going to see a proliferation of issuance platforms, technology providers, as it gets more and more mature, and due to kind of the open source nature of the smart contracts, I think we'll start to see maybe best practices, but still firms will need to differentiate based on reputation, performance, customer service, and to Vince's point about the amount of money that is flowing into traditional capital markets. When you're a company and billions, or if you're Apple and they were going to issue a security token, trillions of dollars worth of capital, you're going to want to go with a trusted brand and somebody who has good experience in the space. And even Airbnb's recent letter to the SEC talking about potentially having the people that are hosts in their network where things are going with shared economies. With these types of players, they're going to want to work with somebody who's trusted. So yes, I think it will get commoditized, and even the different types of contracts, at a Reg D type of contract, an SPV type contract, a Reg A plus type contract, but it's still going to be reputation, performance, and then also integration with the other players in the space on the exchange side and then on the capital raising side. So I think we'll see it happen, but it'll take some time.
So Howard, if issuance platforms are a commodity in 5 years from now, companies today are coming to StartEngine with a token that is basically a KYC check on a basic ERC20 token. fast forward a few years from now, how come platforms like StartEngine on SeedInvest can help startups to be better with their token issuance? What kind of capabilities, features, services should be in the platform for a startup to feel very confident about issuing with a StartEngine or SeedInvest?
Well, you're talking about a lot of the plumbing when all these buzzwords are being mentioned, like AML, KYC. It gets lost in I think it's what it really means. Frankly, this is all the plumbing. The entrepreneur wants access to capital. They want access to investors who are able to invest. That's what they really need. So if the plumbing is very exciting to all of you here, great. But that's not really what people want. They want the money in the bank account, and they have to issue shares for that. So it's going to end up being exposed in different ways, hopefully on Ethereum. Some people are talking about Ripple. Some people are talking about Cardano. There are a lot of options out there. And so I don't know if you use Microsoft operating systems or Windows or you use Mac OS. It may matter to you, may not matter to the ordinary consumer. They just want to make use of their computer. And I think the entrepreneur is the same thing.
Yeah. So Ryan, let me take a different take on the same question.
No, I was just saying, I was interjecting with Howard.
Man, we said no interruptions before.
I missed that part, I'm sorry. That's why I was always in the principal's office. I'm sorry, I'll wait my turn.
No, go ahead.
No, I think Howard makes a great point, but I think the practical reality of the evolution of the cycle where we are today, there is existing regulatory frameworks that we have to adhere to. And AML and KYC are not just buzzwords. Those are regulatory compliant functions that have to be performed when you're handling money. Otherwise, you're out of business. So what technology may allow us to do in 2 or 3 or 5 years, or even today, if we don't have it integrated into a regulatory framework when we're talking about security tokens, we all have a problem, and that speaks to investor protection, and it speaks to the proper movement of capital through the system.
Okay, so Ryan, let me take a different take on the same question. Somebody comes to StartEngine, so Howard believed that having investors is the key, or to SeedInvest, I'm sorry. What products, what protocols, what features should be in SeedInvest for investors to feel comfortable that if there is a token for a startup issued by SeedInvest or listed in SeedInvest is legit, the liquidity is going to be there, like what are those capabilities?
Look, I mean, I echo a lot of what Howard said. Some of these things we're talking about are a cost of doing business, and ultimately everyone's going to get there at some point. But people haven't come to SeedInvest over the last few years to raise money or to invest because we have KYC or AML or accreditation verifications. That's just a fact. It's a cost of doing business. People come to our platform because we have a reputation, both in hopefully getting investors into quality deals that are vetted and in getting the entrepreneurs at the end of the day, giving them the ability to raise capital in a more seamless fashion so they can actually focus on building their business. So, what matters at the end of the day is the experience that people have. Airbnb is not, you mentioned Airbnb. People don't go to Airbnb because they have this amazing technology that connects you with, a host. Anybody could build that. It's about the community that they have and the viability of the marketplace. So I think those at the end of the day, when we flash forward a few years, are going to be the things that matter. All the plumbing is absolutely mission critical, and everyone in this room knows that we're at the ground floor, just like a few of us were at the ground floor years ago around the Jobs Act. We all had to figure out a lot of these things. When we were on April 5th, 2012, when we signed the Jobs Act into law, we had this idea of maybe verifying accreditation, but nothing like that existed, so we had to build that. But people don't come to SeedInvest because we have that system. That's something that people can build. And so I think it's very similar to what we went through years ago.
So Michael, you and I had an email exchange about this weeks ago. What's wrong with the standards in this market in security when it comes to security tokens? Do we have the wrong standards? Do we have too many standards? What are we missing?
I think standards are a good start. I do feel like we see new standards coming out every couple weeks. Really really Fabian's presentation was fantastic earlier today, which basically said that, in my view, ERC20 tokens are the reason why this technology is really proliferated. It's basically you have very simple functions that you're programming into a smart contract that everyone agrees on chain, and you can have interoperability protocols. So I think people are trying to do that with security tokens as well. I think the problem is there may be too many standards and not enough actual activity on those standards itself. So, you know, we haven't really been focusing on the standards itself. We've seen new ones, you know, coming out every day. What we tried to do is we tried to push forward a framework, which we're calling the two-token waterfall, which is basically a liquidity optimized framework for private placement securities. It can adopt any standard. We'll pick the standard later on. Basically, what the framework is trying to do is it's trying to solve the liquidity problem in private securities. It's you're replicating the entire stack of a financial transaction. There's token A and there's token B. Token A represents debt, token B represents equity. And if you look at a real estate property, if you can basically fully capitalize the deal through these two tokens, you can have transparency on the deal. You can see if you basically have a viewpoint on the asset, what the asset is worth, you can price token A and you can price token B. So this kind of no arbitrage scenario allows you to, with that plus transparency, actually having full transparency on the entire asset will help liquidity. So that was our attempt to push this industry forward.
You just killed another one of my questions again, ahead of time, but okay. So we're talking about protocols, so that's a nice segue to the next section. Vincent, I'm gonna go with you. Every STO today is an equity token for the most part. It's an equity representation, shares or something. Isn't that like the killer scenario for security tokens today, given that they pay dividends, there is a yield? Why aren't we focusing more on that?
I think some of us are. So I do, again, I guess being a little bit older and being through a few cycles, we look at smart contracts as the ultimate structured finance product. So it can be debt, it could be equity, it could be profit participation, it could be revenue participation, combination thereof. Monday night, we're very pleased to close on Aspen Digital. Tokenization of the Aspen St. Regis Resort. That wasn't pure equity, that was a REIT. 10 days from now, you'll see us announce a very large fund interest that is tokenized. 3 weeks after that will be a very significant debt instrument. So I think debt, and part of the panel earlier before us was very astute in the disintermediation of some of the middle folks by access of, the investors who haven't had that opportunity that would be very happy with a 5 or 6% yield. We're particularly seeing that in real estate. And you're going to see, I think, compression of CapEx as a result of it, certain illiquid instruments, right? Illiquidity discounts of 30, 40% on illiquid instruments are going to begin to evaporate a bit when they have access to liquidity. And we think that's going to be the case in many debt instruments.
Ryan, how do you guys think about that when it comes to SeedInvest?
Yeah, look, I mean, a couple things. One, I think over the last 18 months, a lot of people in the space have learned this, but if you take a crappy investment that is not on the blockchain, you put it on the blockchain, it's still a crappy investment. So first and foremost,
a decentralized
it's the same
investment.
thing, right? That I just want to make clear. And along the same lines of that, I don't see why the market 10, 20 years from now will look that much different in terms of the makeup. So real estate, debt, equity, it all hopefully should move on chain. I think everyone's in this room because they believe that. Now, which asset classes are the early adopters? That might be why some people are going towards equity or real estate. But I think at the end of the day, it's going to kind of mirror the private capital markets that you see today.
I see. So, Michael, let me go back to you. Like, why don't we have a protocol for tokenizing debt today until sort of your paper came out, which I probably call the most important paper in security tokens in the last year, but what are we missing?
Thank you. By the way, Todd, the co-writer on that paper is brilliant. And obviously had a very significant portion. He should be on this panel instead of me. I think, if you look at security tokens, they're just basically a digital version of the real world asset. So the compliance is the same, the functionality essentially is the same, but you're putting a digital wrapper around something that previously was very difficult to transfer. So Derek Edward Schlosser, who's in the crowd, wrote this really great article called The Digital Wrapper. And what he basically explains, he went through the history of the internet and kind of tried to explain what email did to mail, right? Mail previously, in order to get information around to the other side of the world, you have to mail something to someone else, and it takes a week for example. But now you have email, and you could basically have to click a button and send something to someone on the other side of the world. Think about what kind of impacts that had to business, what kind of to education, really impacts the society, globalization, all of that from being able to transfer information seamlessly. This digital wrapper is going to have that same, comparison effect. You basically put it around a security. You can send it, obviously subject to compliance. You can send it to someone else on the other side of the world, whether that's token, whether that's equity, or whether that's debt. I think there's going to be some term that comes out that's not globalization. Some thought leader is going to come out with it, and it's going to be bigger than I think what globalization did to society. If I had a token every time I heard that email analogy, I'll be doing pretty well right now. Well, we need a better one. So let me stay with you there. I have this theory about what I call crypto financial primitive. Like when you think about the next generation of platforms, programmers writing these protocols, what are the things we need? Is it debt protocols, equities, derivatives? Like how do you see that world? Like what primitive you should offer a developer to be able to write STOs in a very compelling way without hacking smart contracts by hand like you do today? Yeah, I think the ultimate goal is to abstract all of this away, blockchain completely, from the end user, right? People around the world, they know they're actually transferring value, and they're using these protocols and using these platforms, but they don't actually realize that they're using it because the app that they're looking at doesn't look like a blockchain, doesn't look like a shell terminal, because and they're not managing private keys. That stuff's really confusing to most people. So I think that the tokenization platforms eventually will just be some sort of portal where a developer can come in, they can upload information. Obviously they have to make certain disclosures, they have to structure the deal appropriately, and then primary issuance platforms, like SeedInvest, which is really incredible. Congrats on your news today.
Thank you. I appreciate
it. Their job is to find the buyers, right? Their job is to connect the buyers and sellers. And so ultimately, basically what you do is you abstract this away from developers. They think about it as they drop their asset into this digital bucket. It spreads it out onto all these people, and now they have access to this asset that they never had before. It's kind of like the Uberification of real estate or assets, right? Previous to there are some bankers in this room, but previous to real estate, to doing real estate deals, you would have to go to the bank to finance your debt, right? This allows people around the world to basically finance your debt, to fractionalize it and finance it. And then, if you have the right framework, if you have the right structure, you can potentially have liquid markets emerge afterwards.
Great. So Howard, let's go with your favorite topic, decentralized exchanges and trading. Do you think there is a place for decentralized exchanges when it comes to security tokens, or is all centralized?
You're setting me up, Jesus.
I know.
Yeah, I did write an article that said that regulation is the enemy of decentralization. And if you think about it, what I'm really trying to say is, look, the rules of regulation, there are thousands of rules. They're complex. They're just in the United States. And then you can go into France, which everybody thinks has no rules, has tons of rules as well. And then a lot of countries are following what the SEC does. Canada is a good example. They don't have the Jobs Act yet, but they probably will get there. And if you look at all those rules, and then you look at decentralization, and if you look at Bitcoin as a great example of decentralization, you can do regulation at the gates, right? You can do it where at the exchanges. They haven't bothered to do that yet, but they probably will get there. And the issue really is this. If you have a security token that can move around because the decentralization says, oh, we did the check on this person is good, but they're not a broker-dealer, you can't rely on it. You can't rely on that check because you as a broker-dealer have to do the check. So decentralized is really a peer-to-peer system where one person meets the other. There cannot be any commissions paid. There cannot be any money made out of it. So if there's tokens that were created to make incentives, it's going to be probably an issue with regulators. And yes, they don't have control on something decentralized. They would have to shut down hundreds of thousands of servers in order to do it, or I don't know, kill switch if there is one. But the reality is that we live in a world of rules and regulations, and that's it. We just have to deal with it. And a lot of people in this world have made an opinion that it doesn't matter, it's not important. I think they're going to have a rude awakening.
Yeah. I'm going to stay on that topic for a minute to see if Steven has a heart attack with this. You guys, tZERO, how do you think about decentralized exchanges? Are they the enemy or?
No, I wouldn't say they're the enemy. I think it's very interesting, and as people keep alluding to the fact that it's so early in this kind of ecosystem and secondary trading of security tokens, at the moment to make regulators comfortable, even with a centralized exchange and just having a security token trading on a registered ATS with a clearing firm who satisfies custody and control, and a broker-dealer who does KYC and AML and risk management tools. I mean, there's a lot of pieces that are needed that a lot of people kind of take for granted a little bit from traditional capital markets, where yes, the technology is there to allow for decentralized transactions. And I think the ICO boom and craze of 2017 was maybe the best and worst thing that happened to this market, where you had a lot of capital coming in, a lot of people learning about it, but then people kind of thought, oh, well, this is how things can trade in an unregulated world. And when we were even doing our own offering, people coming to us and saying, what's the deal with this? I got to do KYC, I got to give you my social security number. And we're saying it's a registered offering, and what's the deal with all the disclosures? And well, the same disclosures existed in other ICOs, they just didn't tell you about them. So it's something where you kind of try to match the technology with the regulatory environment. But to say that in the future decentralized exchanges won't be a thing or won't be more popular or the way to go, I think is a little tough. Even looking at e-commerce, I mean, the richest man in the world now is a founder of an e-commerce site, where I think in like early 1990s, e-commerce was illegal. So to kind of look at how the regulatory environment will evolve, the technology will evolve, we're still so early, but the idea of having, being able to do a trade without any middleman is great, but also back to the centralized exchanges, that's where you're going to have more liquidity, you're going to have more price discovery, and you're going to be able to do it in a way that satisfies regulators. So I think for the near future, we'll see more centralized exchanges, and then those centralized exchanges connecting with each other. Decentralized exchanges in a regulated environment, I don't think is there yet.
That was a politician's answer. Michael, let's take the contrarian viewpoint on this one. You're behind a protocol for decentralized trading. How much do you think programmability will help to make regulation on-chain and decentralized?
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going to happen. I think all the compliance is going to get codified into the smart contracts. That way it's transparent. That way regulators themselves can just run scripts and actually see what's happening on-chain. We take compliance very seriously. Today we announced our partnership with Genesis Block. Lee Schneider is a broker-dealer, so that's going to be our foray into tokenized securities. The way I think about decentralized trade, the way I look at trade itself is there's 5 core components to trade. There is peer discovery, there's price discovery, there's execution, there's clearing, and there's custody. You kind of go in that loop every time you want to do a trade. Right, so if you can decentralize all of those while staying compliant, you can gain very, very significant benefits. Like, for example, decentralizing custody. Let's just focus on that for a second. Custody itself is a very highly regulated event on Wall Street, right? You have to have, you have to have the securities approved that you're willing to take custody, and that makes sense, right? Because you're someone is taking over your asset, they're holding your asset for you, and that's kind of scary, right? So obviously a very highly regulated event. And now take a step back to what security tokens are. What's the entire addressable market? We have public securities, which are highly liquid. We have private securities, which are much less liquid. Our thesis is that the public securities market, we already have strong capital markets. We're probably not going to address those with security tokens. It's not going to provide an immediate benefit. But the private securities market, that's something that, $10 to $50 million deals, something like that. If you can bring those on chain and you can provide the right framework around them, they can trade in a compliant peer-to-peer manner. And back to custody, right? If you're trying to scale this, the private securities market, there's probably 1,000 different securities, 10,000, 100,000 around the world that you can essentially bring on chain. It doesn't really scale with the regulatory requirements. So being able to actually decentralize custody is something that I think is going to allow the decentralized trading platforms to have a significant competitive advantage over the centralized competitors.
Cool. Let's move to talk about the market itself. So Ryan and Howard, you guys, somebody used a term to describe you guys yesterday. They said that you're both survivors from the Jobs Act, that you're two of the few companies that are still standing. What lessons, Ryan, let's start with you. What lessons have you learned from the Jobs Act that are relevant in this world now?
Capitol Hill and takes a lot longer than you think. We certainly learned a lot of lessons through the whole ordeal over the last 6 years. One thing I think that we did well as a space is we had a very open dialogue that we initiated with the regulators in the beginning before the bill was even passed, and we maintained that dialogue. And I think there are other industries that made the mistake of not doing that. So a great example in fintech is Prosper and Lending Club. That happened before the Jobs Act, and they thought that their model was legal because they'd done their homework and had attorneys that told them it was legal, and they both got a knock on the door from the SEC, and at the time, Prosper was the first. They were the largest, and Lending Club said, let's talk, and Prosper said, F off, you get it? And they almost got taken down. And I think they spent $1 million on legal, and that Lending Club ended up kind of taking the lead because of that. And we took a very different perspective. First of all, are the rules of the Jobs Act perfect right now? Absolutely not. There's a lot of, it's workable, and we're all taking advantage of it, but there are a lot of improvements that need to still be made. And I think when you think about crypto and security tokens and how that fits into regulation, there's a very strong argument that we have a square peg round hole issue for sure. Do I think that the rules today are viable and that we should pay attention to them and try to work with the existing rules? Yes, I do. Do I simultaneously think that as an industry we need to have that dialogue with the regulators to try to improve the laws? Absolutely, but a lot of that comes down to educating them on what we're all talking about, because it is complex and a lot of people don't understand it quite yet. So I think that's a big lesson that we learned that feels very similar to 2012 to me.
Let me put you on the spot to earn my reputation here. Do we need to change securities law? Like, is securities law outdated to deal with this new ecosystem?
Of course. Yeah, of course. I mean, most of the securities laws were written in the early 1930s when the popular technology was the telephone. And and these came around because after the Great Depression, there were snake oil salesmen in Louisiana calling people up and getting them to send them money. And obviously we have a lot more information through the internet on people and offerings than we did back then. So it's a different world. And since 2012, we had to do a lot of work on educating the regulators on social media and how that works and things that seem obvious to some of us. But yeah, we need to do, I think education is the first and foremost thing that we need to do as an industry to educate them, because when they were thinking about protecting people from snake oil salesmen calling them on the telephone, they were probably not thinking about crypto back then. So,
Howard, how do you think about securities law today, and how do they apply to crypto? As a country, we're very good at taking old laws and sort of reapplying it to new trends. Is that what we need to do, or do we need to take a serious look at legislation and say, like, look, it's time to change some things?
Well, first of all, I think the Jobs Act is an extraordinary new legislation for securities. What I've learned through when I started that most people don't read, and there was very few people who understood what it was about. We talked to attorneys and pundits in the space, and they all recommended I stay away from it because they thought the SEC will never implement it. And even if they implement it, all the investors will sue you to your ground. And that gave me an inspiration to do this business. And I did that with the game industry. Everybody said, don't go into the game industry. It's dead. Atari's dead.
What? You should put that on the website.
Yeah, but Atari was dead, so everything's dead. People can't see very far. I think Ryan is a visionary for doing this Jobs Act, and I think I would love to, and I learned from my conversations with him. But I have to tell you, the Jobs Act is amazing. We're the only country who has it, and everybody complains here. Everybody wants to leave our country, go and move to Malta, It is unbelievable. They don't get it. They really don't, but they will. The SEC is actually a great organization. It's very thoughtful, very thoughtful. I had conversations with FINRA, with the SEC, and they are really thinking about this space. They're not taking it casually. They're not trying to cut innovation in our country. That is not how they operate. On the other hand, there's incidents with Elon Musk, who I'm a big fan of. They're not amused when people just treat them like they're not important, or they defy the rules completely. They're not amused by that. And so there's sanctions and enforcements, and you see investors saying, we won't invest in American companies anymore because I got a subpoena. Well, why did you get a subpoena in the first place? Well, probably because they were not thoughtful about what they were doing. And so my view is that the Jobs Act is great. It will get enhancements, and that's what it usually does. The House puts an act in place, and then it goes out, and the regulators put it in place, and then there's always some fixing going on. But we're blessed. We're blessed with an extraordinary piece of legislation. We should take advantage of it, and I recommend people to read it, because even today, there are a lot of people, like you didn't mention the regulation crowdfunding in your list. Regulation crowdfunding is unbelievable. I mean, again, most people don't see it this way, but I see it. You can raise up to $1 million. Soon it will be probably going up. You don't have to go through a whole SEC review. They use a company to do the review. You can have, the investors have a 1-year lockup on their shares, which is okay. But it's very inexpensive. You're talking about thousands of dollars to do an offering. And that is a revolution in itself. But it's masked by this whole crypto world who has raised billions of dollars, billions. It's masked. But guess what? It is a very, very well thought through legislation, very strong. It has a future. And what you're going to see with the crypto and the blockchain is going to move towards that regulation. It's going to move towards it and adopt it. And that two together is the perfect storm that's going to allow us to become a very big industry.
Yeah.
I would just add, too, that really quickly, I mean, regulation exists for a reason, and it's been built up over the last 80 years for a reason, because it is a balancing act. On one hand, we want to remove friction so that we can allow entrepreneurs to build companies and create jobs and build GDP, and that's great. But on the other side, we do need to protect investors, and some of the regulation is instrumental for that. So it's a continuous balancing act, and as new technologies emerge, you sometimes need to revisit these concepts.
Right. So, Vincent, if you look at public market architectures, I mean, Wall Street makes money based on trust. And most people don't think about it that way. A lot of the capital that gets moved on trade is based on trust established between different players. Most people in this conference, we actually believe that security tokens are going to disintermediate a lot of those aspects. Carlos Domingo from Securities used this analogy in the previous panel that we only need 3 layers or 3 components or whatever. However, I feel that almost every player that we hate in public markets, like pick your favorite clearing houses, broker dealers, the other, is trying to make a play for the security token space. Are we taking the risk that we're going to rebuild the same mess we have today under a decentralized architecture?
A couple of comments there. So first and foremost, we're going to have less of a mess as a result. We're still going to have a mess.
Like from 100% to 99%, or from 100% to
50 to 75.
Right.
And I think it's actually the essence of this very conversation. And Michael is absolutely brilliant, and I'm blown away with the stuff that he comes up with. But starting with, we're not an advocate of a decentralized exchange for securities. And Michael knows us. We have these wonderful conversations, and I think those conversations challenge both of our thoughts to come out with great results. And, mad respect for Ryan, and so excited as a fellow entrepreneur and a brother who we were I think we were the first 6 folks that started the Crowdfunding Professional Association and Crowdfunding Intermediary Regulatory Advocates during the Jobs Act. So we go to the beginning of the Jobs Act. And there's another lesson in that as well, as this is history repeating itself in blockchain. It's many of our technology friends who are coming to the foray, and they're going to decentralize, and they're going to disrupt, and they're going to dismantle everything. And guess what? You may have the best technology in the world, but when you're dealing with a security, you cannot even begin to transact until you have the regulatory licensing and provisions in place. And Ryan, he's one of the survivors who pivoted and grew and iterated, but I can't tell you how many dozens of our friends who are Reg CF or Title III aspirational platforms and this was when law was in place and passed, and we had 6 months or 180 days of rulemaking to get through, and guess what? 5 years later, when the final rules were put forth. So many, many, many of those aspirational great technologies never saw the light of day because they couldn't put it through. So we started with regulation first, right? And do we think the laws are right today? Well, we've done 23 petitions for rule change, comment letters, and no action letters to the SEC and FINRA in the last 32 months. So no, we don't think they're all right. But it doesn't matter if you think they're all right today. If you want to be in business and transact, you have to comply with the rules that are there today. So we start with being executable. That's why we closed the deal on Tuesday. That's why we've done the first secondary trades of the security token on an ATS, because we have the regulatory approvals. And we're skating to where we think the rules we can change over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And maybe in that point we'll have fully decentralized, but it's a long answer that goes back to trust. We're not going to see institutional participation in this space unless they fully trust the market infrastructure. Removal of counterparty risk, KYC, AML, suitability requirements, all the things that could be deemed boring but are hallmarks of our financial service industry. Why do we collaborate with CUSIP? Because we have continuity of information. Price disparity, information disparity now has symmetry across all investors and can be discovered on a Bloomberg and Reuters terminal. I think that's pretty cool. There's 10 million CUSIPs out there. We're going to move it to tokenized instruments now. Well, when we talk about decentralization, again, not knocking on Michael, but when we talk about 12G, how many people know what 12G is, the holder of record rule, right? Back to the Jobs Act. We moved that from 500 to 2,000 shareholders. Guess what? When you have 2,000 shareholders, you have to be compelled to be a public filing company. How many people in the decentralized world are thinking about that and have a system to do that? Why do we reconcile back to a transfer agent? Because there's verified holder of record rules that now the regulators say, got it, we have a level of comfort. These are the things that I think drive trust, and it's going to continue to iterate. And
I think everything you described can be programmed into smart contracts, and I'm super excited for that to happen because computers...
Just show me how you comply with the regulation. The program is the easy part.
Well, you program the regulations into the smart contract. It's very easy.
No.
And
do you have a clearing firm?
Well, one at a time.
Do you have trading?
At the end of the day, computers are much better than humans at doing
Guys, you're making Howard look good.
This is entertaining. I think the audience wants this to happen. So.
Steve said we have to have a little bit of spice.
So Michael's point is programmability amplifies regulation to a point that it can all become smart contracts.
You know it's right.
Right.
You know it's true.
Well,
very easy. You don't need to trust a central counterparty
I'm a programmer
anymore.
as well, but I'm dating myself. It's 35 years ago. But the reality is you have Rule 144, where you have to know, if you're an affiliate, what the amount of trading there is on every marketplace is to decide if this affiliate can trade. It means you need an oracle, which means you need a trusted source in your decentralized. It's no longer decentralized if you have to have a trusted source.
Right,
so how are you going to reconcile that?
Right, so you basically have walled gardens that you basically have oracles. I think you're exactly right. You have oracles that are telling you on the blockchain who can trade, who controls the whitelist.
But it's no longer decentralized.
It's called licensed people. It's called ATSs, broker-dealers, clearing firms, transfer agents. The essence. Therefore, it is not decentralized. It is semi-centralized at best. And by the way,
semi-centralized fine with me.
That's the subject of a patent that we were just granted globally to cover trading, clearance, settlement, and depository of a security on a blockchain. So there is a precedent, and we're doing that for no other reason to create standardization and best practice so that we can all collaborate and have an infrastructure to work from. But decentralization did not exist with regulation.
I think the bottoms-up approach is going to win, but that's my opinion.
Guys, you didn't get this with any other panel. All right, so Max, with tZERO, can we get rid of some of these guys, some of these players, or do we have to rebuild the same mess on top of decentralized infrastructure?
So I think there's a lot in there, and I think there's a lot that some folks, even myself before joining I dropped out of finance as a sophomore in college because I didn't like it and I thought it was corrupt and I thought it was BS. And but there's a lot that you realize that you take for granted in the back end, and some of the things that Vince is alluding to, from the broker-dealer, the clearing firm, the transfer agent, all the pieces that work well together, yet there's still a big mess in the back office, and a lot of things that can get automated and can be put on a distributed, somewhat immutable ledger. It makes sense to move that way. I mean, we can't argue that there aren't things that are messed up. When you look at Procter & Gamble, they had a shareholder vote, they had 3 recounts, and they still came up with different results every time. Obviously, that system isn't working. The securities class action recovery industry, not many people know about, but if you invest in an Enron or a Tyco, or there's a fraud in almost any merger or acquisition that gets announced, there's a securities class action case that comes from that. The people who held those shares and were lost money because of it are owed money back. And there's this very messy process with claims administrators and sending out letters and finding out who the shareholder of record is, because everything's held in street name and you don't know who actually owned the stock. A lot of these back office systems and middle office and kind of things that are behind the scenes can be made much more transparent, much more efficient, and that those benefits will come back to the actual investors. But at the same time, we're still early with the technology where it's not scalable enough or cost effective to do things on chain. You even look at cryptocurrency exchanges like Gemini or GDAX, the trading still happens with a traditional matching engine and traditional risk management and traditional trading tools. It's different deposits, it's different inputs and outputs in the trading system. So being able to do transfers on chain, being able to leverage the technology in spots where it makes sense will definitely help to clean up the mess. And anything that you can do to automate processes will take human error out of it. At the same time, there's still going to be humans involved. There's still going to be bad actors that look for loopholes. There's still going to be things where you have problems. But the really exciting part potentially could be a shared back office across a lot of these different broker-dealers and clearing firms. I don't know a single broker-dealer. We have over 150 broker-dealer customers. I don't know any of them that like their clearing firm. You have breaks, it's tough to deal with. And then there have been initiatives in the past with Goldman Sachs, Citi, JP Morgan to kind of go to a shared back office, and they can all agree that it makes sense in theory, but then it comes down to, okay, well, we'll use my back office. No, well, we'll use my back office. Well, now it can be a spot where we can have a decentralized ledger and a decentralized back office. So I think, and I know you may say it's a politician's response, but we're trying to move it forward using the tech that makes sense and is efficient today while filling the holes that are inefficient, and there are a lot of them, but it's a progress.
That was a presidential candidate response. We're on number, bro. Like we're on number with these guys. Howard, to Max's point, how much of this regulation with security token is going to take place off-chain versus on-chain? How much is people doing, like today, 90% of security token is taking place off-chain.
Right, so for those, just to explain the on-chain, off-chain. So on-chain means you have a smart contract that handles a lot of things, and if you need information about the shareholder, the name, social security number, address, that is called off-chain, is in an old format database, hopefully not a spreadsheet, but you never know. And so that database controls it, what we call off-chain. So today, if you look at security tokens, most of the security tokens that are done today are created in a smart contract under ERC20, which in a way, it's interesting because it's free form. You can trade it any way you want. And so there's new contracts that are coming out with, for example, Harbor and Polymath and Securitize.io, and they're creating something a little bit more, I would say, in compliance because they have some blocks so that it's not free-flowing. And at the end of the day, my opinion is this. You're going to have on-chain, which is a smart contract to manage either the security as a stock certificate, digital security. It doesn't do much. It's there. It's visible. And you can see where it trades. Or you have more sophisticated ones that will take care of some of the compliance issues. But ultimately, they have to go off-chain and probably going to have to go to a registered transfer agent so that you can have more than 2,000 shareholders, because liquidity with 200 or 300 shareholders is not liquidity. It's a joke. You need tens of thousands, or at least several thousand people. And in order to enjoy and not become a reporting company, you want to be able to issue it with regulation crowdfunding, regulation A+, and then use the registered transfer agent, and now you can really put together a great marketplace.
Right. So they're telling us we're out of time, so let's end up with 2 questions on a high note, both controversial questions. And this is for everybody, so you have to go quickly, yes or no. Do security tokens deserve their own blockchain? Michael?
I only get a yes or no answer?
Well, and 20 seconds of why.
I think there's a potential for specialized blockchains for security tokens.
Vincent, is Ethereum good? Do we need a new one?
I'm sorry, Joe, and consensus friends. No, I don't think ERC20 is the protocol for security tokens.
I know what Howard is going to say, but go.
ERC20 isn't a protocol.
I don't think it really matters. I think you guys
You're the technology guy.
you're debating which blockchain is going to make it. I don't think it matters.
No, I'm saying, do we need a new blockchain specialized on security tokens at the protocol
No,
level?
I don't think you need a new one.
Okay. Ryan?
Well, I'm going to just take a different answer, which is I think part of the opportunity right now is that we have the ability to reinvent some of the rules. And so things like, right now, why don't private company shares trade? Because the lawyers put a ROFR in all the deal docs. So we need to use this as a way to change some of those things. Otherwise, you're not going to have any liquidity no matter how great the technology is. So I think that's interesting.
Max?
I think we will see new blockchains come about we've already seen kind of now 3rd generation blockchains launching that need to solve things with scalability and cost effectiveness. And I'm excited to see things move from proof of work to proof of stake with the same security and the same protections that come with that proof of work. And I think we're starting to see, and I think it makes sense to have a new blockchain for securities.
That's great.
I want to
So,
agree with Howard a little bit, though, whether it is ERC20 or a different protocol, there needs to be standardization. And liquidity is hard enough, so I think a lot of people in this room are going to have to work together for this to actually take off.
all right, last question. Tell me something you believe about security tokens that most people disagree with, and the next person who mentioned the Jobs Act gets kicked out of the panel. Go, Michael.
That most people disagree with. Can we go to the other side first?
No. No. Come on, decentralized exchanges are going to be cool, whatever.
I mean, I want to reiterate what Ryan said, is that basically if you list a shitty security as a security token, doesn't really
No,
make a
everybody
difference.
agrees with that. Right?
I don't know about that.
It seems like most of the things that have come to market have not been great up to this point.
All right, Vincent, what do you believe about security tokens that most people disagree with?
Well, I think it's regulation first and technology second. And that is going to win the day and move the space forward.
All right, Howard?
I think we need to decentralize the SEC.
That's you get the award for the best answer of all the panels of the entire conference. Ryan?
I think there are a lot of people who have written papers and blog posts on this topic that are ignoring some very fundamental issues that they need to start thinking about. 12G is one of them. Blue Sky is one of them. And there are a few of these very fundamental challenges that have not gotten enough airtime and thought.
Is your answer going to be that tZERO is going to launch next year?
I wish you would have been further down the panel, but
sorry
no,
about
that's
that.
fine. There's a lot of things in the back end that people don't quite realize once you start digging into the weeds. But yeah, regulation is absolutely key, but you also don't need to be a company that's leveraging blockchain technology in order to issue a security token. You could just be a great company and then wanting to have your shares issued and traded using the technology of the future.
All right, perfect. Guys, thank you very much. Please give it up for the phone.